and welcome. This is Lights Out, and away we go with the episode. With the Formula One podcast for fans by fans, I'm Will, and as I look across the digital garage, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, or should I say my co-driver, Sam. Hello, Sam. How are you?
Hello, Will. Hello, listeners. I'm very well, thank you. Enjoyed another weekend with a Formula One Grand Prix.
Yes.
How are you?
Yeah, we've had a good couple of races. I'm very good. I've actually done some racing this weekend. I was on my brother's stag do. I went go-karting. And you'll be
How'd you get on?
You're pleased to know I qualified P5 and finished a very respectable P2. I was one of the only few to really climb up to the field. A few late passes, I think. There's one. I was probably a bit. If there had been stewards, I would have got in trouble, but I got away with it. Like sort of late breaks and sort of basically caught them by surprise. And then I caught, I think for third place. When I moved up to third place, the guy was. It was a yellow flag. We were all going along the walking pace, and he didn't spot the lights go green, and I jumped him then. So that was very satisfying.
Nice, very good.
Got a nice little medal, nice little trophy. Yeah, but had a good weekend on the stag do, and I was listening to the 5 Live commentary of the race on the way back of the Spanish Grand Prix. Before we jump into who won it? How did you feel the race was? Was it an entertaining race for you? Watching it on TV?
It wasn't terrible. A lot of the expectation for Spain's generally pretty low. It's not a track that's well known for its exciting on track racing. It's usually quite strategic, and that proved to be the case again on Sunday. But that didn't make it any less enjoyable. No, I thought it was quite good. We did see quite a few overtakes, the majority of which were quite kind of DRS-y, for want of a better phrase, in a sense. So just get a nice toe and stick it up the inside on the first corner and make the pass pretty early. But there were quite a few of those. And yeah, the strategic kind of battle, particularly from sort of second down to 10th, was quite interesting. So I enjoyed it. I particularly enjoy having 2 races in 2 weekends. It's nice. It's after that, because it felt like ages, didn't it? We had that massive break earlier this season when we had about 4 weeks without a race. So yeah, nice to have a couple in quick succession.
And the unexpected cancelling of Imola as well.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, no, it was good. It was a good one. What did you make of the radio commentary?
Yeah, well, so the radio commentary made out that it was very interesting, and they made it very engaging listen in the car. I felt like there was a lot going on. They covered a lot of the sort of the dramas and that, and then I watched the Sky highlights on YouTube, and the overwhelming comments in the comment description were, "Well done, Sky! You've made a really boring race into 11 minutes. Congratulations!" So it seems like the commentary team on the radio did a better job of selling it than what it probably happens as a reality, but. In today's episode, we've got plenty to discuss right across the grid, actually, a real range of people to focus on and teams to focus on. And I'm going to start with our usual spiel. Who won the race, Sam?
Well, the fastest driver in the fastest car won Max Verstappen. Predictably won again. 3 in a row. Yeah, he's looking pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, pretty impressive. I mean, I like how we're laughing about this now. I wonder if Max goes on a bit of a winning streak over the next few races, if we'll start to get quite annoyed at the fact that I mean, we are, I think, as Formula One fans, annoyed at the fact that the same person keeps winning the races by a country mile. But yeah, last week we talked about the magnificent Max and how good he was in Monaco.
Yep.
How would you describe his performance this weekend?
Serene, really. I mean, he was quickest in all the practices, quickest in qualifying, quickest in the race, won the race, got the fastest lap, sort of completed the Spanish weekend, really. Yeah, he was in a league of his own. I mean, to some extent, I almost feel like each podcast for the next little while is going to be one very quick conversation about who won, and then a much longer conversation about everything else that happened, because they're almost 2 races, really. I mean, I'm pretty convinced Max is trying to find ways to keep himself occupied, genuinely. Like, he sounds bored at the front. He's so much faster than everyone else. He's not pushing the car to the limit because they've got such a huge pace advantage as it is already. The car's really good on its tyres, so there's no jeopardy there, even at a race like Spain, where the surface is quite rough and therefore quite difficult on the tyres. He had no problem with that at all. Churning out fastest laps, even taking to the kind of leaving track limits just to keep his race engineer entertained, was like, it felt to me like he was just kind of mocking the rest of the field, really. So yeah, it does. I don't know. It seems a bit ominous, doesn't it? For the rest of the season, but
yeah. Well, not even his team can slow Max down. Like you say, he had was it? You got the black and white flag for 3 track limits and for 3 separate corners as well, which is quite an achievement.
Yes, and driving at about half pace probably.
Yeah,
So I don't quite know how, but yeah,
and
he did.
It was quite funny, like how the team then his engineer said to him, keep it within the white lines. You don't need to risk this. We don't want a penalty because obviously I think fearing in case something crazy happened. And then literally the next lap goes and sets the fastest lap, and then there's quite a good exchange, being like, "Right, Max, you can bring it through." He sounds the engineer sounds very, very like passive aggressive, being like, "Right, Max, you can bring it home within the white lines now, please." Yeah, and Max like, "Yep, cool, very good." Yeah, and apparently he could have got 4 track limit penalties and still won the race.
Yes, he could.
Quite extraordinary.
His race engineer Giampiero Lambiase, he's sounding more and more like a disgruntled teacher, isn't he, on the radio, just being like, "Max, come on now."
Yeah,
and when Max set the fastest lap, and I think he set it by about half a second or something stupid as well.
It was crazy. It was a big gap.
It was after that. It was after Lambiase came on the radio and said, "Yeah, I'll bring it home now." Max's comment, it was just, "Yeah," and that was it. That's all he said.
Yeah. I mean, it was the perfect drive for Max. I think there was only 10 minutes throughout the whole race weekend where Max wasn't top of the timesheet, and that was in Q1, I think, when Gasly was set the quickest. And I think in Q3 he only set 1 lap, if I'm correct in recalling that.
Yeah, he only had to in the end.
Which is pretty crazy for Q3. And as I said at the start, I think Max is going to go on a win streak now. He's got loads of circuits he really likes. None of them are street circuits, and also his teammate is a bad weekend for Checo again.
Yep.
Damage limitation, couldn't get out of Q2 and could only get a 4th. I mean, I thought when I saw that he was charging through the field, I did think he was going to just charge right up to the Mercedes, but no, Checo seemed to have a bit of a poor weekend. Really, he didn't get much airtime on the radio. Was he covered much at all in the Sky coverage?
No, not really. I think actually, just while we're talking about Checo and Max, I remember in the last episode we talked a bit about the importance of the driver and how big a impact the quality of the driver has in a particular place like Monaco. Just to give our listeners a sense of the difference between Max Verstappen and Checo, bearing in mind they're driving the same car. If Max Verstappen started where Checo started the race on Sunday, where do you think Max finishes?
First.
100%, right? Yeah. Checo, not only did he not finish first, he didn't get on the podium, and he got beat by George Russell in a slower car who started behind him at the start of the race. This is just, he's just not even in the same league, unfortunately.
Well, that's what we said a couple of weeks, haven't we? That Checo doesn't have the drives in him that Max does. I think it's Miami I said that Max is able to pull the car from anywhere on the grid and get it close to first as possible. And I've got a fun little quiz question for you.
Yeah.
After 7 races, we've had 417 laps of racing. How many laps have Red Bull led, and how many has the rest of the field led?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's going to be some massive deficit, isn't it? I don't think they haven't led all of them. So I'll go. They've led 402 and not led 15.
Oh my word! 1 out, 401. And 16 laps has been led by a car that's not a Red Bull so far after 7 races. I'm going to be so intrigued if Red Bull do win every race to see what that stat is come the end of the season, because it'll be mightily impressive. And I think the gap won't be closed much at all. But I thought that was quite a good stat that on the dominance of Red Bull this year. And it's actually, as we've said many times so far this season, that's probably one of the most damning stats about the new regulations, is that one team can dominate so significantly over everyone else.
What's quite interesting as well is because of the era of Formula One we're in, we're not actually seeing what the true dominance of that car is, because we live in a world now where a lot of the kind of the differential factors about Formula One are basically the tyres, right? They are the primary thing that changes over the course of a race. That means you never really get to see a car at full chat going around a circuit for the whole race, because they have to watch their tyre degradation, and preservation of tyres and all the rest of it is like a really important component, particularly of a driver these days. Now, it wasn't always like that, Formula One. In years gone by, drivers could just throw the car around as much as they want. That's why everyone loved watching Senna so much, because they didn't have that problem with tyres. Yes, they changed them, but they didn't degrade to the extent that they do now. And I am genuinely convinced that if Red Bull were not constrained by tyre degradation in the way they are in the modern era of Formula One, I honestly think they would probably lap the field, like the entire field, most weekends.
Yeah.
That's the level of pace in hand they have over everybody.
Yeah, and just why I bring up on tires,
Mm.
this year the tires haven't seemed to be that big of a feature of the strategy of a race at all. Tire degradation on the whole seems to be pretty durable. You know, are getting quite a lot out of the tires, and there's no sort of complaints of the. I remember sort of 4 or 5 years ago where the Pirellis were sort of notorious for just dropping and like the pace going off them really quickly, and it made it more of a spectacle because people had to be really careful of their tire management. Whereas it feels now they can really push them. I saw some the other day saying the reason why the tires are so sort of durable and can last longer, and the degradation is so good is because of feedback from the drivers.
Mm.
And I'm like, well, you can't have the drivers aren't going to say, yeah, we want really tires that fall off a cliff, and that's kind of going a bit against the sort of the entertainment part of the sport, really, or the strategy part of the sport, really, because they're making these tires sort of really suitable for these drivers to do long stints on them, and it's kind of robbing Formula One of the fun sort of strategy element of it. That's what I'll say on Pirelli tires. But yeah, I wonder if you've got any sort of thoughts on this year's tires, because they usually are a major thing, aren't they?
Yeah, so we saw a bit of it this weekend, but that as I sort of mentioned earlier, it's exacerbated by the fact that the surface in Barcelona is quite harsh on tyres. So you tend to see a bit more interesting strategy, which we'll talk about in a minute, because there's some teams that aren't Max Verstappen that did have quite interesting afternoons from a strategy perspective. But no, I do agree with you. They've sort of moved much further towards catering for what the drivers want. Over the past couple of years, and I don't know, it's quite a tough balance to strike, isn't it? Because we want tyres that degrade to some extent in Formula One to keep it interesting. I'd actually go a step further personally, and I'd mandate 2 pit stops every race and say you have to use all 3 tyre types during a race. Yeah. That would just be, I don't know, my personal preference. I know there are arguments against that because it might result in lots of teams sort of picking generally similar strategies, but I don't know, it adds an element of jeopardy, or could potentially add an element of jeopardy for me. So there's that, but then to some extent, yes, they do also have to cater for the drivers, and there's a fine balance, isn't there, between having tyres that degrade so much that the drivers basically poodle around the circuit to try and protect them for as long as possible, or tyres that don't degrade at all and the drivers can just go at full chat without any kind of consequence whatsoever. And that's where you really would have to think about introducing stuff to make it a bit more interesting, because otherwise you would just end up, as I've said, Red Bull lapping the entire field, which is probably what would happen in that situation. So it's a tough balance to strike. I don't think they're too far out, but this was one of those weekends where they were helped by the circuit. That's not always going to be like that. There will be others throughout the course of the season where tyre degradation isn't too bad, and depending on which tyres they select from their range of options, we could see it a bit strategically a bit less interesting than perhaps we had on Sunday.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to Red Bull before moving on, because like I say, we could spend. We could. There's so much other things to talk about, and actually, the win and Red Bull is quite easy to cover this week. The 5 live commentary did almost get itself for Latifi for some of the stupid comments they made towards the end of the race. So obviously congratulating Max on the win and saying it was a great win. And the commentator, I can't remember who it was saying, well, actually, this isn't about, Formula One should not be trying to sort of rein in Red Bull. They've set the standard, and actually it's a real shame, and it's on all the other teams for not meeting that standard. They're too far behind, and it's really let down sport. It's like, that's extraordinary to criticize everyone else. I mean, yeah, everyone else is behind the Red Bull, but like in Formula One, when we've had dominant teams like Mercedes or Red Bull, they've brought in measures to sort of bring back the car performance to make it a closer field. No one's really calling that, partly because it's not Christian Horner that's on the losing team, so there's no, Toto and others aren't sort of wanting to win without having to sort of resort to calling in for those sort of things. But I don't know, it just seemed like I think a lot of Formula One fans can look at the sport right now and go, Red Bull are too far ahead, and that's the issue with the sport. Not going, oh, it's the other teams, it's the other nine teams. They're the reason why the sport's rubbish at the moment. If you look at those other 9 teams, the gap between them is closer than it's probably been in years.
Yep.
And if, like I say every week, if you forget about Red Bull, we're having a really good season. It's a really interesting jostle. But yeah, I just thought it was a really delusional commentary point, and I want to give it an honourable mention before awarding my actual Latifi, which I will come to later. But yeah, just thought I'd get that out of my system.
Good,
thanks. And I suppose probably they didn't win the race, but the real winners this weekend, it definitely got the sense from their interviews and just sort of the performance on track as well, was Mercedes. This is the first proper circuit outing on a proper track rather than a street circuit for their upgrades, and they seem to be working both Lewis and George seem much happier in the car. The performance in the car is looking really good. I think it's definitely the second strongest car at the moment. The Aston Martin was sort of a bit AWOL all weekend. Really wasn't really a threat. I know Alonso had damage in qualifying, but they didn't really get close at all to challenging. And like you say, George passed both the Astons to get up the field. What did you make of Mercedes' performance this weekend? Now we've seen it on an actual circuit rather than a street circuit.
Yeah, simultaneously very good and probably a bit depressing at the same time, I think, for them. I mean, very good in the sense that they've clearly moved away from a philosophy that wasn't working, that Lewis did not like at all, had a really low ceiling, and they knew they were never going to win races with, most likely, apart from the kind of outlier that was Brazil last year. On the other hand, I think it is good and it is definitely promising. It's moving in a promising direction. I think there are a few factors it's probably worth considering. So one is Mercedes generally always perform very well in Barcelona. Lewis also generally always performs very well in Barcelona. And yeah, some of the other teams, I mean, we're going to talk about Ferrari in a bit, and Aston Martin really did drop off quite a bit. So I think it's not quite as clear cut as Mercedes are absolutely definitely the second quickest car. But as I mentioned in previous episodes, like the way Mercedes are capable of developing a car throughout a season, I think is second to none. Even Red Bull, I think arguably Mercedes develop a car better over the course of the season. So they will definitely be clear and they're second in the constructors now. I don't really see I don't see that changing. They'll extend the gap. I think what we'll end up with by the end of the year is Red Bull, on 5,000 points or whatever, a big gap, then Mercedes, and then you'll have a gap between Mercedes and one of Aston and Ferrari, probably Aston. They will definitely cement second place, but I think there'll be a bit of regret probably that they wasted 18 months on that philosophy that they have, and they've now got something that's definitely more workable with a higher ceiling, and they can develop their way to chasing down Red Bull. But they've given up so much time, and particularly in kind of with Lewis Hamilton in mind and the age he's at, and the likelihood is in him having probably a couple more years left in Formula One. It is, I don't know, there'll be a tinge of regret there. I doubt any of them are thinking about that, and certainly Lewis definitely isn't. By the sounds of him at the moment, he is like pumped at the minute, which is great. But as a Mercedes fan and someone who wanted to see them kind of fighting it out with Red Bull quicker, it does feel like it's a bit of a shame that they've lost as much time as they have. But that being all said, they've moved in the right direction. The car seems a lot more pliable. It's a bit more difficult in qualifying by the looks of it. They've gone for a very kind of Red Bull front end, and that's fine. But it means that the tyre warm up in qualifying is quite difficult, and we saw that with both drivers actually on Saturday. But what it means is they're really, really good on their tyres in the race, and they absolutely battered the opposition on Sunday. Like, their tyre management was really good, their pace was really good, and as I said, Lewis was in a groove that we've not seen him in for a little while now. And there was just no way anybody was catching them. And as we've made reference, they both finished ahead of a Red Bull, albeit driven by Checo, who's not having a great time of it at the moment, but still to finish above a Red Bull is pretty good for them. So yeah, I think they'll be very happy. But Toto and Lewis will be under no illusions. There's an awful long way to go left to get close to Red Bull.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well, Lewis said it was the best car he's driven in 18 months, which tells you everything you need to know about how bad that other car is. He's driven this car, twice now, and it's better than the one they started the season on and the one last season. I suppose it was interesting seeing some of the written coverage of the weekend of the race result, and quite a few people saying, it's all well and good that Mercedes have got this new car and feel happy with it, but they're sort of citing how last year at Barcelona they thought they'd fixed all the porpoising issues, and then next the next couple of races it kind of the car went backwards, and it was sort of it unraveled, and the issues they thought they'd fix hadn't actually been fixed. So there's a lot of caution, I think, about that, and sort of people saying, don't think that Mercedes are on the path to victory and glory just yet. But I think you're right as well on Lewis. He seems in a much happier place. Just the way he's sort of engaging with the press in his interviews, he just seems much more positive. Probably feels quite vindicated, sort of saying, we should have done this a long time ago, and probably feels quite annoyed that they wasted the start of the season and all that resource as well, going down the wrong path. And I think you called it about, was it before Monaco you called this? You said how this upgrade lands with Lewis is actually really important to his future in Formula One. And before Monaco, before the car was actually on the circuit and Lewis had driven it, there was, it was almost from the talk and the speculation that the deal to Ferrari was basically a signature away. Whereas as soon as he drove the car and he started speaking to the media, he sounded much more positive, and it then came across that this new contract is literally weeks away, and you're saying at the weekend. I think he had a meeting with Toto today to discuss the final details of it, and now I think there's no doubt at all that he'll be at Mercedes for next season. I think the thing that we're really interesting to see is how long the deal is for. Will it be for 1 year? Will it be for 2 years? Because if it's 1 year, that means he's putting all his eggs in his basket. That next year is the year that he's going to win the eighth, and he's going to go for the eighth. And if he doesn't, he's gone. Or 2 years, he thinks, it's I think almost like a voting confidence really of how much he backs Mercedes to turn things around. And he was saying in his interview at the end of the race that he thinks they'll be in a position to maybe challenge. I think it's quite optimistic, but to challenge Red Bull at the end of the season for wins. And it's very much about now setting themselves up for next year. I mean, if Lewis, and I think Lewis is the only one out of Red Bull drivers, I think he's the best driver at winning a race this season. I think he's got the best talent and skill to go on and do that. And I think he's the biggest threat to Red Bull to win a race. And if he wins, that podcast after that race, we are going to go absolutely mental. And and you and I was going to say, if it's Vegas, which would be amazing location for him to win that, in the first race, but also you and I are at a wedding on the Saturday night, and the race is at Sunday morning at like 6:00. That will be, you and I will go mental in a hotel room watching that and going through that. But yeah, that should be a very interesting podcast. The day that Lewis wins, especially if it's this season.
Yeah, no, I think he will pick up a win this season. If I had to put my money on it, I wouldn't say Vegas. I think more likely Brazil. He's got a good record there. That comes at the right time of the season. We obviously saw Mercedes win there last year at the back end of a very, very poor season. Yeah. And I think this car is definitely better than the one they had last year. So if they're going to win anywhere, it'll be there. I'm minded to agree. I think they'll be challenging for wins by the end of the season. But the kind of question really isn't necessarily about this season. Like, I'm pretty confident Mercedes know the season's gone. Lewis knows the season's gone. They've made their peace with that, which is good. And they're now thinking about next year. I think Lewis will sign for 2 years. Personally, I think he'll sign to the end of 25. And have a couple of years as a crack at it and see how they go. But the fact that Red Bull are so far ahead, and I don't know if they'll be thinking about 2024 now, but it won't be long. Like, why would you spend any more money? Like, you've got almost a second on the field right now. What are you going to gain, really? I mean, they'll probably bring a few little bits here and there, but they're not going to drastically change anything. And I think, with a kind of wind tunnel penalty kicking in as well this year, I would expect them to be thinking about 2024 from the summer onwards, really, sort of after Silverstone. So, yeah, we'll see. But no, it's definitely positive for Lewis, and good result for George as well. Obviously, he flew up the grid, didn't he? Got a really good start. I personally think he's quite lucky to get away without a penalty into that first corner.
I was going to bring up that penalty because on the BBC commentary, they had Mark Priestley that used to be the McLaren race engineer, and they watched the replay of it, and he said that penalty is a slam dunk. He's being investigated. It's a slam dunk, and then literally like 2 minutes later, it's like, yeah, and the students have not given him a penalty. I don't know how, because he uses the escape road in the first second corner. So then basically, how many cars did he pass? Like 4, 5?
Well, so he had a brilliant start because he was on brand new tyres. So he got off the line really well. I think he overtook 4, and then he was very close to passing a McLaren into the first corner. Hence why I suspect your 5 Live commentator was so annoyed, because it was a McLaren he was sneaking past. But then I don't personally think he got the move done. He wasn't ahead, and then he took to the escape road, which he's entitled to do. But it does seem a bit mental, doesn't it, in Formula One, where like in any situation where taking a kind of Mario Kart style shortcut like down an escape road gives you an advantage. Like go like on other circuits, generally if you go down an escape road, it costs you places. It doesn't earn you places. So it does seem a bit weird that they've set it up in such a way that George had the option available to him to take the escape road and jump ahead of the McLaren. But the fact that he got away with that is he's very, very fortunate. Let's put it this way. I think he's a very charming young man, and that probably weighed in his favour. Because if it was, I think there are other drivers, I've got a feeling they might have got trouble for that one.
Maybe the stewards were charmed by that same personality as well. And he had a brilliant overtake on Carlos Sainz as well.
He did,
the first corner. And that, if you've not seen it, I'd recommend going and watching the highlights just for that move alone. Really aggressive, sort of taking him as well. And there was a brilliant bit of I hope they play this on the Sky commentary. There was a brilliant bit of team radio where the engineer was like, "Great, good move that." And what does he respond with? He's like, "Was it only that good?" And then Toto comes in and like, "That was very good." And I was like, "Oh, that was quite a funny sort of exchange between him and the team."
Yeah, no, that was good. That was a good bit of radio. Yeah, that's the kind of radio I really love. Love
Yeah.
hearing. It's good banter there. I enjoyed that.
And before we move off Mercedes, I know you've got a theory of another reason why you think Mercedes and especially Lewis performed very well this weekend.
Yes,
I'll let you put this theory to the listeners. I'm yet to be convinced, but go on, see if you can get it on side with your theory.
I thought, given some of your previous Fernando Alonso, who was it, Taylor Swift chat, I thought this would be right up your street, but no, apparently not. So Lewis was asked I think it was in a press conference or something, or in front of an audience before the race started or before qualifying started on Saturday, if he was single or had a girlfriend or whatever. I think he said he was single at the time, and then said, "Oh, I'm looking for a chica." Obviously, the race happening in Spain, and then of course during the race they cut to a shot and Shakira's there watching. And there was a knowing look at the camera, and I just thought, I wonder if that's a little connection that could be made or has been made. So yeah, I did wonder if maybe that was some extra inspiration. I know if I was racing and Shakira was watching, I'd probably feel inspired to drive a bit faster. So
newly single Shakira as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I mean, I would make puns out of Shakira and Lewis dating, and we could have a sequel to our Taylor Swift one. But I sadly, apart from Hips Don't Lie, I don't really know much Shakira music. So if you know any good puns, let us know. But that could be the story of the season. Shakira, and if we have any more boring races and nothing much to talk about, we can talk about the love life of Lewis and Shakira. So we've covered Red Bull, the winners. We covered Mercedes, probably most improved, probably the happiest of the teams this weekend for their performance overall. Second and third on the podium for them, which is a really good result. Oh, I should also say, before we move on from Mercedes and Lewis is the only non-Red Bull driver to record two P2 finishes in this season. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can suck on that, Fernando Alonso.
He's I think I said this at the start of the season, the only driver in any situation and in any car that's going to challenge Max Verstappen this year or next year is Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, retweet.
He's driving like that. So
yeah, come on. Come on, indeed. So we covered those two. Now let's go to what would probably at the start of the season we probably thought the third. Before we saw the pace of any cars and sort of launches, we thought they'd be the third best team or the third challenger for the title, especially after last season as well. But actually, I think probably at the moment, fifth best team in the grid. We covered them last week, and we sadly have to cover them again. Ferrari, a dreadful, dreadful race result for both drivers. Carlos Sainz starting P2 on his home race and sort of went backwards. No sort of challenge, no sort of threat to anyone. I think everyone found it quite easy passing him, and finishes P5. And then Charles has awful problems in qualifying, thinks there's an issue with the back of the car. They then take the car to pieces overnight with what they can do during Parc Fermé, which is basically when they're very limited in what they can change and look at overnight. So he starts the race on the pit, and I think he finishes P. Was it
12? I think in the end.
P12. Yeah,
11,
I've got the result.
He didn't make the points.
Here. Yeah. P11. P11.
Oh yeah, because Tsunoda got a penalty, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. So yeah, P11 for him, and there's much to sort of analyze here. I don't know where to start really. We could go one driver by each, or do you want to quickly come in and give your views on Ferrari's disaster class, and then we can go into some bits and pieces of the chaos and the mess of this weekend for them?
Yeah, all right. Well, let's. First I'll start with. Ferrari getting a Latifi from me this week.
It's impressive. This is the first time I think they've had one. I think.
Yeah. Which is. I don't like taking the mickey out of Ferrari because they are such a good historic team, but they have been a bit of a meme for the last 18 months, particularly. And it's not really been any better. And I think it's kind of cumulative, this Latifi. They have had a couple of poor weekends in a row, but some of the decisions they made this weekend were genuinely baffling, particularly on a weekend where we saw lots of teams. So a really normal kind of boring F1 race, like most teams have the same strategy. They just time them slightly differently to try and get ahead of each other on track based on undercuts, overcuts, whatever. This weekend was actually a really good opportunity for lots of teams to try different strategies. So you saw like Lewis go, I think he went soft, hard, soft, or soft, medium, soft. George went soft, medium, soft. Max went medium, hard, medium, I think. And we just saw lots of different strategies. And generally speaking, they all kind of worked. Some worked a bit better than others, but there were no really, really bad ones. apart from Ferrari. I don't know how they managed it on a weekend where pretty much any strategy you went for was likely to result in success in some form or another if you had pace in the car. And they still managed to bungle it. So they started Charles on hard tires, which it felt like a mistake anyway. I mean, like, fine if you're going to run really long and try and take advantage of a safety car or a yellow flag or whatever, which didn't happen. But the best thing about that Ferrari is wheel-to-wheel racing. The best thing about Charles Leclerc is wheel-to-wheel racing. Just put a pair of soft tyres on him, put a set of soft tyres on the car and let him go and see how far he gets. But no, they went with the hard tyre. And then they pitted him after 16 laps. It was like 8 laps. Oh, no, hold on. It was 7 laps before Lewis came in and he was on the soft tyre, which is supposed to be chewed up in like an instant on that surface. So, yeah, it was really bizarre. I mean, they have car problems anyway. I've mentioned previously that they are quite hard on their tyres in general, and this is a track that chews them up quite a bit. So they had that disadvantage. They've bought a load of new upgrades, which don't really seem to have made much of a difference. If anything, the car's more difficult to handle now than it was before. And then, yeah, the strategies were just bizarre. And yeah, Carlos had an unfortunate time being overtaken either on track or in the pits, and Charles couldn't even get into the top 10. So yeah, pretty terrible weekend for them, really.
Do you know why they changed the tires? You know, to basically do a hard stint and then give up, because it wasn't like his times were badly or he was doing badly on it. Was it just a change in strategy at a really odd time?
So I the benefit of the doubt is probably something to the effect of they thought the degradation was going to be much worse than it actually was. And
Right.
I thought that, to be fair, as well. As soon as I saw Lewis and others on soft tyres, I was expecting them to be in within about 15 laps. That didn't happen. They all managed to make them last until the kind of mid-20s and seemed to manage them quite well. And they had quite good pace even later on in that stint. So that probably made Ferrari think, oh, we're on the hard tyre when we don't really need to be. Like, we don't need a really long, durable tyre right now. We can probably get to the end on just softs and mediums now. So why not make the switch earlier? The problem with that is the whole purpose of starting on the hard tyre at the beginning was to take advantage of an instant, right? And try and take advantage of a safety car and lose less time in the pits and gain loads of places that way. That was the gamble they chose to take. To throw that gamble away after only 16 laps. Now, I know with hindsight, wonderful, no incidents happened, they were probably justified. But at the time, it just seemed totally backwards. Like, it was just not, that wasn't the game plan at all. And I understand, they want to kind of think on their feet and stuff. But all it would have taken was for Charles to come in, change from his hard tyres to a set of mediums or softs, and then someone to bin it in the wall the next lap. And that whole plan you had in place, which if you just waited another lap or two, would have come to fruition. You'd have looked like an absolute genius, by the way. You lose that completely, and it just, the mind boggles.
But I suppose no one else, like you say, there were lots of different tyre strategies over the weekend. No one else was sort of creating a strategy based on the potential of a safety car. Everyone else was sort of going on performance and the battles around them, whereas Ferrari seems to be playing their own sort of game, playing completely different games to everyone else, despite everyone else sort of going after performance, which is, Barcelona's not really well known for its safety cars and its incidents. It's more known for its boringness, really. So I don't know why.
Yeah,
sort of
maybe the rain was a factor as well. That's possible. I mean, you
mean the sweat in George's helmet?
Yes, that was another really good bit of radio this weekend. No, maybe Ferrari thought there'd be rain later in the race, but I don't know. Basing a strategy on a weather forecast has never been an advisable thing to do in Formula One. So even if that was true, it's still not a good way to go. Teams don't do it. You just make sure you're on the right tyre at the right time. That's the rule.
I saw Charles say that the car felt completely different on the same tyre in two different stints, that's a very odd sensation to have, and that's almost like the issues that Mercedes were having last season, where they just couldn't figure out what was causing the problems with the car and why it was so unpredictable. And it seems like Ferrari have got really lost in the development of this car, because this car, it's improved slightly on last year, but they came into the season, if you remember, it feels like a lifetime ago now, but their season launch, their test track, it was so confident. It was uber confident. They thought they were going to win the title this year. They thought they'd close the gap to Red Bull, but actually they're going backwards and they're kind of getting caught out. And I think you're right. Their strategy is sort of, it's just a disaster, and it's so hard to for them to change that reputation now. They're known as sort of the joke of Formula One for their strategy. And you must wonder what is going on in Ferrari for them to be on the end of that. And I think you're seeing the drivers are looking so unhappy. And it's like Charles, I mean, I say this every week, every time I see Charles now, he just looks so fed up and so frustrated. And I really wonder what conversations he's having with his management team about his future at Ferrari, because he surely must be considering other options or how to get out of there or how to get a better drive, because he must be so frustrated in the number of sort of mistakes that the team are making, and it is mistakes that they are making. I mean, I've said this every week. I think his actual engineer has now been sacked, from what people were saying on Twitter. So that'll be interesting to see if that's a thing. But I was reading in the comments on it's on the YouTube highlights. Oh, someone said that Ferrari were like Tottenham Hotspur, a team you deeply dislike. But I actually think that's not the right comparison. I actually think they're a lot more like Manchester United. They're a very historic team. They've won a lot in the past. They've won the odd thing here or there. The odd race here or there. They've got some talent in there, but there's also a lot of people that probably shouldn't be at Ferrari, such a historic team. And I think maybe that Fred Vasseur is probably more David Moyes than Eric Ten Hag. But I'll just leave that one with you. But I was pretty happy with that sort of comparison when I gave it a bit of thought.
Nice. Well, as someone with two very good friends who support both those clubs you've just mentioned, I'm not going to comment because I'll be getting it in the neck if I do. But I'm minded to agree with you. I think it's quite telling, isn't it, what the drivers' kind of body language and some of the messages and stuff they send like if you look at George and Lewis, and I think Lewis is right when after the race he said Mercedes have got the best driver lineup in Formula One, and I think I agree with him. Yep. Like they both turn out great performances every weekend. They've got total trust in the team. I mean, Lewis's trust has been a bit shaken because of the design of the car, but they've gone in another direction and he's on board and he's been a big reason why. And like, it feels like there's a really good connection there between the drivers and the team. And when you listen to the Ferrari drivers, I mean, Sainz was questioning strategy calls last year, never mind this year. I mean, I remember Monaco last year where Sainz just refused to come into the pits because he knew it was a terrible decision and was totally vindicated and ended up on the podium because of it. That was last year, and it's been the same this year. I mean, Charles was called in after 16 laps and they said box, and he just said, why? And then complied. I mean, if I'm Charles, I'll stay out, to be honest. I'd have just said, no, I'm not coming in now. What are you doing? Like, you put me on hard tyres for a reason. Leave them on. What are you doing? And even Carlos as well was a bit belligerent about the team and stuff, and was pretty angry, wasn't he, last weekend as well with the strategy calls in Monaco. So yeah, you've got two drivers extremely unhappy. You've got a team that's really dysfunctional, and they get a pretty hard time from the press as it is at the moment. Not just podcasters, but actual Formula One press, particularly in Italy. It's not a great place to be at the moment. And the problem, particularly Charles, unfortunately, is Mercedes look like they've got their act together. Lewis looks a lot happier. That move is evaporating very quickly. And where else is he going to go? I mean, Red Bull aren't going to take him. The only way is down, really. I mean, unless he thinks Ferrari are going to continue to drop to such an extent that a move to kind of Aston Martin, which I've suggested previously might be a possibility if Aston want to upgrade Lance. That could happen. But apart from that, I mean, there aren't many seats that are going to be taking it away from Ferrari, even in its current situation. But not great.
I mean, the final point I'll make on Ferrari before we move on is that it feels like something radical needs to happen at Ferrari to shake and wake up the beast. And it just seems like they're sort of just drifting, and they're not. They don't seem like they're championship winning team elect, or they're nearly there or thereabouts. It feels like they're miles and miles away in many different factors: their performance, their development, their strategy, and the mistakes they make on a strategy-wise, you don't see Red Bull or Mercedes making. And you're not going to win world championships if you're making those weekend after weekend. And it is a theme. And I'm sure we'll predict this now. We've been very on the money with a lot of our sort of predictions so far. So that's a good sort of thing. Long may it continue. I'm just touching some wood just to do that. But it's not impossible to predict that Ferrari is still going to have more and more issues as the season goes on, and it'll be from strategy blunders as well. But yeah, sad to see Ferrari do badly. Not what we want to see. And with that, we'll just take a very quick break. Hello, welcome back from the break. Hope you had a jolly old time. We had a very jolly time here. We just talked about Wigan, the team I support. And
so jolly.
Actually, it wasn't a very jolly time for us. It was actually quite a miserable time for me as I was recounting some of all the issues that my beloved club are experiencing. But anyway, let's use this energy, this negative energy I've got towards Wigan, to award my Latifi now.
Yes, let's have it.
Again, I'll do my quick summary for the new listeners. These are our awards every race to people that have done something stupid, annoying, ridiculous, silly. Actually getting quite hard to award over the last couple of races because we've had this was the second race in 3 races where we've had no yellow flags and all 20 drivers finished the race. So yeah, the days of Nicholas Latifi binning it in the wall, sadly missing, who we have named our esteemed awards after. So it was quite a hard one for me. Obviously, you went for Ferrari, which I thought was a very, very good one. I probably wish I'd gotten there first for that one. But anyway, I've had a thought, and I did say the annoyance of the 5 Live commentary. They were very close to getting one, but I've gone for Nico Rosberg, who's had a bit of a shocker of a weekend as a Sky F1 pundit. So Nico Rosberg, for those that know him, he was, we've mentioned him a couple of times across other episodes. He was a Formula 1 driver. Him and Lewis Hamilton grew up racing each other and then racing each other in the sport. He was a bit of a nothing driver at Williams and then moved to Mercedes with Michael Schumacher when Mercedes came to the sport. And then him and Lewis partner each other. And then he plays quite dirty to win his world championship, in my opinion. And yeah, he wins his world championship. And then literally the next week retires from the sport and then becomes an entrepreneur. He's invested in lots of cool eco stuff, which is very cool. But he's also become a pundit and has become quite an unpopular pundit. I think a lot of the fans across many teams do not like Nico Rosberg because he's quite controversial, likes to wind people up, I think, deliberately picks on people who had rivalries. So he's very critical of Lewis, but also just, not an overly positive guy, really. Not, if Jenson Button and David Coulthard are those sort of like positive, really sort of approachable, but also like you get a lot of sympathy for them because they really explain to you what it's like to be a Formula 1 driver. Whereas I think Nico Rosberg uses his position to sort of be very, very critical. And actually this weekend he took a bit too far. And he was, after the race, he was criticising in an interview. He was interviewing Christian Horner and saying, Checo, obviously not what you want from his second driver to not be doing very well. Not very good, is it? And probably the best thing Christian Horner will probably do for a long time, which I actually really rated, sort of turned around to Nico Rosberg and said, you've become very critical, haven't you? I mean, I don't remember you being like this as a driver. And yeah, just really sort of put him in his place a bit, which I really respected because he's gone a bit too far, and it's sort of classic sort of tendency to sort of sensationalize things and trying to wind people up. And then he tried to be very forced and fake with Lewis when he was interviewing after his P2, sort of saying, "Oh, great this and great that," and then he was like, "Oh, really good to see you." And Lewis made his views on him very clear by sort of saying, "Right, thanks," and then just walked off. So didn't return the compliment, which is fair enough because I think Lewis probably doesn't like the bloke. But yeah, so he gets Latifi for being a really annoying pundit and being very arrogant and for winding people up and being overly critical.
Yep. Okay. I'm not going to argue with that. I watched quite a bit of him this weekend. I don't want us to have to label this podcast explicit, but he was an ass all weekend. Like it wasn't just the thing with Lewis, or it's just there's just something about the way he communicates and
he tries to wind people
drivers
up.
And so, yeah,
he tries to wind people up.
Yeah, and it's a kind of there's 2 different ways to wind people up, or 2 different reasons for winding people up. It's there's the slightly mischievous kind of Kimi Räikkönen vibe where like you're just doing it to have a bit of fun, and then there's the probably got a bit of a chip on the shoulder kind of reasoning for it. I feel he's a bit more of the latter. He's definitely got like he's obviously got his issues, isn't he, with Lewis and stuff, and that's fine, and he's not alone actually in that case. But yeah, I think it sort of bleeds through a bit into the way he communicates with a lot of the drivers and stuff. So yeah, I thought that through the weekend. Really, he's just not great really as a pundit. No. I don't think, and yeah, I can understand why fans get annoyed with him because he was deeply irritating this weekend. So yeah, maybe I agree with you on that one.
Maybe Jenson can give us some tips and grace and decorum, and because Jenson is a Formula World champion and is sort of treated very respectfully, and is sort of held in high regard, whereas Nico Rosberg is a bit of a laughingstock. Anyway, moving on for him. 2 drivers we want to talk about now had a bit of a battle this weekend, and they're both having very good seasons, quite under the radar seasons, especially one of them, and that is Zhou and Yuki Tsunoda, they were jostling for ninth position, was it?
They were.
And they're both having good seasons. We've not really talked about Zhao much at all this season, but he seems to have been improving in this second season. Dare I say it, better than Bottas, which is a bit alarming for old Valtteri.
He is better than Bottas, I think. Yeah,
well,
he
good on him. Good on him.
He's having a really good season. In a pretty terrible car as well.
Yeah.
The Alpha's not been great. So yeah, to find himself in the points again this weekend was really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's qualifying pretty well as well. And yeah, Valtteri, he's still got some pace in it. Valtteri, I don't know what the kind of motivation level's like, but yeah, it's got a whiff of the Raikkonens when he was at Alfa Romeo, doesn't it? Really kind of ready to sail off into the sunset a bit. But still, you've got to beat him. And yeah, Zhou's having a really good kind of under the radar season, as you say. So yeah, pleased for him to get into the points this weekend.
And Yuki also having a very good season, really stepped up. I think there was a lot of question marks about how would Yuki cope, and it sort of, if you've watched Drive to Survive, it's very much pitched as this season is for Yuki to step up and be the lead driver of that team against Nick de Vries, who is an experienced driver who's won Formula E, and Yuki is absolutely wiping the floor with him. Has been very close to points or been in the points quite frequently. But also, not only that, his just driving has matured a lot. There's not been any sort of the reckless, sort of immature mistakes he's been making as compared, not as much as previously. And there's been no sort of mega outbursts as well. And I'll post this on the Instagram, but there's a brilliant photo of Yuki meeting a basketball NBA player. And honestly, the size difference is, you would think it is Photoshop. It's that alarmingly different in size. It's quite an entertaining photo, but yeah. But the reason why I wanted to talk about them, not only for their underrated performance so far this season, is because they had a bit of a duel, and Yuki got a 5-second penalty for, in my opinion, being on the racing line and doing nothing wrong. And I don't think he deliberately pushed Zhao off, but he got quite a harsh 5-second penalty, which pushed him down to 12th, which is out of the points, I thought was a bit of a shame. But Sam, what did you make of his defense of Zhao trying to overtake him?
I think he moved twice under braking, and okay, fine. Maybe he didn't totally force Zhou Guanyu off the track, but he definitely forced him to take evasive maneuvers when he was alongside. And that isn't really acceptable going into a braking zone. So, however, what I do agree with you about is the penalty is a bit harsh. I think personally there should have been a way for Yuki to have been able to keep 10th place as it was. Because 5 seconds ended up costing him the point that he would have got. And yeah, that of itself felt a bit unfair. I think this is why this new kind of FIA, hey, we're talking about them again. This is why this new kind of FIA edict not to get involved in stuff during the race and leave it till the end and just apply a time penalty is a bit flawed, I think, because it means in situations like this where I don't think it's 50-50. I think Yuki's definitely at fault. And Zhou should have had the right to that corner and should have had the place, but it is a bit harsh to cost Yuki basically, the first points he's going to get probably for a little while, for the sake of that one instant. So yeah, it would have been nicer for him to perhaps have just been told, no, come on, you've gained an advantage by forcing your opponent off there. Give the place to Zhou, move on. But that didn't happen. So I think the punishment's harsh, but I personally think he was at fault. So. But yeah, he's having a really good season. I do agree with you. He's having a great season. He's a really likable driver, and everybody wants him to do well. But yeah, in that situation, the way he defended was a bit. It was a bit Max Verstappen 2 years ago, a bit naughty, and I think the rules have been tightened up for that reason. So yeah, fair enough.
I should say I have been pronouncing his name wrong, so apologies that it's not Zhao. It's
Zhou.
Zhou. So apologies that Zhou. Yeah, he's having a good season, and it's nice to see him kick on as well. And yeah, I think he did feel pretty annoyed at how he was sort of given nowhere to go really by Yuki. But yeah, it seemed like the commentators were a bit split on that as well from what I was hearing. But yeah, tough on them both, but at least they're doing well. And now let's move on to McLaren. Bit of a weird weekend for them. Lando Norris ending qualifying P3, which is very unexpected. And he was quite upfront by saying, I very much expect not to finish the race here. And he did that with even, you should have maybe said that for the first lap, because Lewis and Lando collided a little bit in the first, after coming out the first corner. And Lewis is very lucky not to get any damage at all, no puncture, whereas Lando lost quite a bit of his front wing and had to pit on the first lap.
Yeah, I saw some stuff. So I saw a couple of things on Twitter about this that were both mental. So first of all, there was a lot of criticism of Lewis.
Oh, really?
Somehow, I don't quite know how. I don't think Lewis did anything wrong whatsoever. He
But Lewis,
basically
but
got driven into.
you've got to remember, Lewis can never do anything wrong in our eyes.
Well, I don't know if that's true. I'm quite capable of being critical of him as and when it's
in
needed.
my eyes,
In your eyes,
then.
maybe, yeah. But yeah,
That's where you'll get the critical analysis of this duo.
Yeah, when it comes to Lewis, anyway, yes. Yeah, I don't think he did anything wrong at all. And there seemed to be some chat about why did McLaren pit Lando, but everybody seemed to have not noticed that not only did the front wing end plate come off, it came off and then lodged itself in the other half of the front wing. Like, aerodynamically, that is a disaster. He had to come in.
That's happened to McLaren in other races this season where they've picked up damage from someone else's car coming off and hitting their car,
yes.
and then they've massively suffered. So that's a bit stupid. People saying that.
I know. But then this is the joys of social media. Will shouldn't pay attention. I know the lights out Twitter feed is fun, but I shouldn't pay that much attention to it. Should I really?
Yeah, so that's the if you're on Formula One Twitter, our Twitter feed is the only place to go. Good bit of promotion there.
Retweet.
Very good, very good, very good.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm just Lando. He flatters to deceive a bit, doesn't he? I think this feels like a regular occurrence now, where he will do a great job in qualifying. He'll put himself in a situation where he's got a great opportunity, and something will happen. Now, in some cases, there's an element of misfortune. I'm thinking kind of Russia when it rained and he lost his win to Lewis or whatever. But I don't know if it. I don't know if it's he lacks conviction or something. There's something about the way he races that makes him vulnerable, I think. And he positioned the car pretty poorly, I think, into that first corner. Like, it's no one can read that Sainz is trying a stupid move around the outside of the Max Verstappen of all people into turn one. Like, fine, okay, that could happen. And then Charles kind of backed out of it and took a slightly weird line, and that concertinaed the pack and made things a bit more difficult. But I still think, pro racing driver, someone of Lando's caliber, and he is a really good driver, he shouldn't be getting his nose into a place where he's going to lose an end wing plate to Lewis Hamilton's rear tire, and he just should be better than that. And I don't know, it feels like a regular occurrence now. Like, every time Lando puts himself in a good position, some kind of misfortune or accident or incident kind of befalls him, and it costs him. But I don't know if I'm being a bit harsh there, but I did think at the time, I just thought, oh god, really again, Lando? Come on, man, just finishing the points for goodness sake.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I think also the good thing about Lando Norris is that his start in his first couple of seasons in Formula One went like incredibly well. As a rookie, he established himself pretty quickly, became very popular with media, but also with a lot of fans. He's one of the most probably popular drivers in the UK.
Yep.
And so, he got podiums and he got a good range of points and performed well against his teammates in those first couple of seasons. And then, obviously last year he got a podium at Imola, but last season wasn't a great season. He still hasn't won a race, whereas, his compatriot George is, in one of the quickest cars. And then this season, I'm just not seeing anything from him that he can take a bad car and drag it to success. Yeah, maybe good in qualifying, but I've yet to see him like outperform the McLaren's performance. And I think that's also, you can see the sort of similarity in performance between him and Piastri. Piastri's having a very good, underrated, I think, rookie season, considering how probably terrible that car is. And I do think there was quite a bit of unnecessary hype for Lando Norris going into the race because, yes, he started P3, and I think a lot of the reaction I saw on Twitter and also on like Sky and stuff was like, just reading the article stuff, it's like he's going to get a podium here. He's, this is a genius sort of bit of qualifying. He's right in the mix there, but I don't think he was ever realistically going to end up in podium. And I think he was quite honest about that on the race as well. So I think it made the pundits look a bit silly, really, by thinking he was going to go on and keep a P3. And I think he said before the race he thought they were going to be lucky or they'd be great if they could get points in the top 10. And he said that the car, in his opinion, is probably the 7th or 8th best of the grid, which is probably not, not too inaccurate as a description of that car. But also as well, it shows you how well that and how lucky them as a McLaren of a team have been, because that team is currently 6th in the World Championship. So, and they're only 23 points behind Alpine, who've got a much better car, and they're 9 points ahead of Alfa Romeo and Haas. So, for McLaren as a team, it's going quite well. But Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. I think he's probably been a bit unlucky, and I think I'm personally not a mega Lando Norris fan. I think there are other better drivers on the grid, and I've not seen enough to make me think, oh, he's next. He's going to be leading teams and winning championships. I think he'll win the odd race here or there, if that really. But
Yeah,
bit of a shame really for them. But at least they qualified the car well, and they're doing well in the World Championship.
yeah. I wonder if he's a bit too nice, Lando. I wonder if there's something about that because I think about previously. He had the opportunity to win in Imola, didn't he? And he chose to protect Ricardo that time, and he had a pretty good opportunity there. And there have been a few other occasions where I don't know. I just don't know. Just there's something there that's not quite clicking or convincing at the moment. And that might just be a form thing, and maybe he's a slight. You reference there is his excellent start in Formula One, and maybe he's slightly victim of that. It's that start he had, and when he did start in Formula One, McLaren are a lot more competitive than they are now. They were competing with Ferrari for fourth, weren't they, at the time? So yeah, maybe there's something about that. But yeah, a pretty poor Sunday as it ended up for him.
Indeed. And before we get to the results of the predictions game, we thought we'd just quickly cover William on Williams, our feature where I take a bit of we just give a bit of love and attention to Williams, the team that are underlooked. We've not talked about them for the last couple of weeks because there's not been much really to talk about. But actually, I suppose we could talk about this weekend. Quite a poor race for them both. Logan Sargent finished dead last, and Alex Albon was 16th. I think you made this call I think after the first race, saying they needed to capitalize on the poor performance of others to get those points. They're currently last in the World Championship. They don't look like they're getting any quicker. They're looking like they're struggling a bit. And I think probably the worst thing for Williams to happen over the whole weekend was the car being craned. And as we talked about last week, you could see the photos of the Mercedes and the Red Bull and the detail of their flaws. The Williams car, it looked incredibly basic. What did you make of seeing the Williams flaw? What's your analysis of it?
Yeah, it did look very very rudimentary. I don't want to completely do a disservice to the aero team at Williams because I'm sure they've done some brilliant work somewhere down the line, but it didn't look anywhere near as kind of intricate as the other ones we've seen, because we've seen what we saw all three, didn't we, in Monaco? It was the Mercedes, the Ferrari, and the Red Bull. We saw all three of them. And compared to all three, it did look a lot more basic. I don't know if there's any truth to this, but I saw some chat that Williams don't actually have like a proper kind of CFD simulation tool in place to allow them to do all of that kind of design. Or do you know? If you
no, I was going to say, just for listeners that might not know what that is, what is CFD?
Oh, so basically it's a piece of kind of computer programming they use to do like aerodynamic modeling and stuff. So it's a combination of that plus the aero tunnel time where they actually test stuff in the real world that they use to basically design the aerodynamics of a car. And the facilities that Williams have, because of the budget they have, are seemingly significantly kind of less sophisticated than some of their rivals. And I think we're starting to see that with the development as well. Like we've seen upgrades come from the Alpha now. Alpha Tauri as well. Like they've both bought new packages over the last few races, and they're starting to pay dividends. I mean, we've mentioned Zhou already, and he's driving very well, but it helps that the car's getting better every couple of weeks, and that's not really the case for Williams, and they are being left behind a bit. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what to make of the floor. I'm not an aerodynamicist at all, but it did look a lot more basic than some of those top teams, and fingers crossed they can sort of take the development a bit further forwards and try and bring the car a bit further up the field later in the season.
Yeah, I think almost for Williams as well. Like I'm most intrigued to see where they are next year, because for two reasons. I think with the sort of we'll see what happens with more developer manufacturers trying to come to sport. Wouldn't surprise me if someone tried to buy a share of them, sort of partner with them to be a part of their team. But also James Vowles, their team principal, who came across from Mercedes. I think there's so much he's going to bring to that team from what he's learned at Mercedes, and I'll be interested to see how that reflects, in next year's car. And so almost a bit like is a long-term game with Williams to see where they go in their future really in the sport and how they develop. Because, I think you and I can both agree that we don't see Williams returning to sort of the championship winning team they were of old. And I think they're very much a midfield team now, which is a bit of a shame. But if they can sort of cement themselves and get a few podiums, that'd be great for the sport. And I think we'd both be very happy to see them challenge for podiums and maybe getting the odd win in the long term.
Fingers crossed.
And so now we move on to the predictions game. We made predictions last week for 3 drivers each. Sam, over to you. Who did well? Who had a shocker?
All right.
Let's hope I had a weekend like Max rather than unlike Ferrari.
All right. Okay. So for the Barcelona Grand Prix, your first driver was Nico Hülkenberg, who you predicted to finish in 13th, and he finished in 15th. So you picked up 2 points for Hulk. Not bad. You also had the other Haas, Kevin Magnussen.
Okay.
Everyone's ideal backup on a pub brawl situation. You predicted him to finish 15th. He finished 18th. So you picked up 3 points there.
5 so far.
And then you had George Russell, who you predicted to finish in 4th, and he finished 3rd. So you picked up a 1. So 6 in total.
I'm reasonably happy with that. That's not a bad showing considering I had 2 of the back markers. So yeah,
very solid showing, I would say.
Who did you have?
I had Yuki Tsunoda, who I predicted to finish 14th. So his penalty served me very well. So he ended up finishing 12th. So I picked up 2 points for Yuki.
Nice.
I then had both the Aston Martin drivers. Now I'm going to talk, not at length, but in a moment, I'm going to talk about why I hate Fernando Alonso. So, Lance Stroll, first of all, I predicted him to finish in 7th, and he finished in 6th place.
Very good, very good. So,
picked up 1, so I'm on 3. And then I predicted Fernando Alonso to finish 3rd in his home Grand Prix with all the hype, win number 33, garage 33. Ooh, 33rd time the race has happened in Barcelona. All of these Sky Sports omens. What a load of hokum that turned out to be. Fernando Alonso finished in 7th, so I picked up 4 for a total of 7. However, well done, Will. Congratulations.
I'm celebrating here. Celebrating. Thank you. Thank you.
Done. Now, the reason I'm so fuming is Fernando Alonso was on a faster tyre. He chased down his teammate and got within a second in DRS, and then decided to do the most un-Fernando Alonso thing ever and message everybody on the radio and say, tell Lance not to worry, I'm not going to attack him. We're just going to carry on and build the gap, being a great teammate like he's never been at any point in his career thus far. And if he just made the overtake, I would have gained 2 points or lost 2 points, and I would have won 5 points to 6 because Lance would have finished exactly where I thought he would, and Alonso would have finished a place higher.
And when he sent that radio message, were you screaming at the TV? You were like, "But what about the predictions game?"
I did. So I'll be honest, Will. I didn't remember necessarily exactly what the predictions were, but I knew that Alonso overtaking Stroll was a good thing for me because I predicted Alonso to finish 3rd, and the further up the field he was going to finish, obviously the better. So I was egging the overtake on, and as soon as that radio message came out, I was like, please let him be trolling Stroll, and he's just going to steam past him in a minute.
100%. The more I see it, the more I think there's some sort of bonus he gets for being nice to Lance publicly. 100%.
So it's either a bonus or
he's uncharacteristically nice.
Yeah,
for a person that does not have that in their locker in the last how many years he's been in Formula One.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Fernando listens to the podcast and just decided to do it to spite my predictions. But
so last week we thought Lance. You said Lance was probably listening to the podcast, and now I think Alonso. We're working our way through the grid.
So they clearly play the podcast in the Aston Martin strategy room every week.
It's Lawrence Stroll's favourite podcast, apparently.
Hey, there's sponsorship potential there, right?
Yeah. We should call them by their real name, Cognizant for Aston Martin Racing.
Aramco, whatever. They've got a stupidly long of a name, haven't they?
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, I was extremely irritated by that. So, Fernando, if you're listening, do one this week.
I mean, you've learned though, because the previous week when it was Monaco, you predicted Charles to win at his home race, and you predicted him to go first. It's a good job you didn't fall for all the omens that everyone else was spouting for Alonso to win, because you would have. Yeah, that would have been a lot of points you'd racked up. So does that mean now, since we started the prediction game, I've won 3 and you've won 1?
Correct.
Ooh, okay.
But the points difference is 8, or I think it's 8 points total now. Yeah.
Oh, it's a big difference. Ooh.
Well, it's quite a big difference. All I would say is you're only 1 DNF away from a leading driver. True, from that to come in. And speaking of which, shall we get into the predictions for next week?
Go on then. Well, not next week. The week after.
We've got
a week off, and we'll tease in a minute what we're going to discuss next week. I think
okay,
we'll lined up. But let's. So not this weekend. The weekend after, we have the Canadian Grand Prix. Sam, let's go.
We do.
Who have we got?
Okay, so first up, you got number 10, Pierre Gasly. Where do you think he's going to finish in Canada? French-speaking Canada. Well, this bit of Canada anyway. It's in Montreal.
In old Montreal. I'm going to go 8th.
Okay. You then got number 14, Nick De Vries.
Oh, jeez. I think he's going to go 15th.
Okay. You then got, and this is where it starts to go wrong for me, number 1, Max Verstappen.
Oh, I think this is gonna be actually a really hard one.
So all I'm going to say to you, Will, is Wall of Champions.
Yeah, I'm still going first. He's still going first.
Okay, I thought
that's not going to work on me.
I thought I could convince you into a Michael Schumacher style DNF, but no.
No.
Okay, all right. Max in first. How predictable. I got number 11, Lando Norris.
Ooh.
Who I've just spent a significant amount of time questioning on this podcast. I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say
P4.
Am I? No,
P5.
No.
P6.
Come on.
P10. P10. That's
P10.
your optimism.
That's what I've got. I've gone for P10. That's right. I'm going to go for 10. Yeah.
Nice.
All right. I then got number 13, which is his McLaren teammate, Oscar Piastri.
Oh.
I think I'm going to go for 13th on that one.
Nice.
It'd be quite close to Lando, but not ahead of him.
Okay.
And then I got, and I'm fuming about this, number 7, Fernando Alonso.
Oh. Fernando's going to love this if he's listening to this right now. He's going to be trolling you right now. Whatever you say, he's going to do the opposite. He was probably going to, if you give him like 3rd, he's probably going to DNF now because of you.
Yeah. I honestly don't know, because I feel like he could be anywhere between like 3rd and 10th now, based on what we saw this weekend. I don't think...
Or could this be win number 33?
No.
Oh.
No, it
right.
No, you're not gonna.
I'm gonna say Wall of Champions. Wall of Champions.
Oh.
Could he benefit from the Wall of Champions?
No, if anyone's going to benefit from the Wall of Champions, it's going to be Lewis. Obviously, I don't see anyone other than one of the Red Bulls or one of the Mercedes winning the race. So let's face it, it's going to be one of the Red Bulls. And it's probably going to be Max. So I'll say he's going to be the quickest of all of those, not those other teams that aren't those two. So I'll say 5th. Yeah, I'll go 5th.
Ooh, okay. I thought you were going to say 3rd, but fair play.
No, I think Mercedes are ahead now.
Wow.
Quite comfortably. Wow. Yeah.
Okay, well that's going to be interesting. Fernando, you know what you need to do? Put it in the Wall of Champions and get a DNF. Do it for the pod.
If you can take Max out with him, that would be great. Make the race interesting, and we'll both pick up a load of points in the predictions game. All right, there we go. That's us for the prediction set.
I always like Canada. Canada's a good circuit. It's always one of my favourite ones to drive on the Formula 1 game. But also, we've had some great races there in the past. Lots of overtakes, some good straights. But also the weather has been there. You know, Jenson Button once came from last to first place in an epic in the rain there. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed we have a good one in 2 weeks. And you know, we can say this, but we know that it won't happen. Let's hope someone that's not Red Bull wins. But yeah, we won't hold out for that.
Who are you predicting to win the race, Will?
Max Verstappen, as I've already done. Who are you predicting to win the race?
Max Verstappen.
There you go. There we go.
Which will be 4 in a row.
I can't wait till this podcast gets to a point where we have different teams and different drivers that we can predict for race wins.
Yeah, that'll be great, won't it? God, we'll be spoiled.
It would be good.
And all right. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks very much for joining us, everybody. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you did enjoy it, please share it with a friend. Hopefully they enjoy the pod more than Giampiero Lambiase enjoyed trying to explain to Max Verstappen why he did not need the fastest lap and to keep it on the circuit this weekend.
I always enjoy these very topical endings to the pod.
Thanks, yeah. Please follow us on Twitter. We are at Lights Out Lads, and on Instagram we are at the Lights Out Pod. Will, oh Canada,
that was beautiful. What a lovely voice you've got.
Thank you.
Yeah. So no Canada next weekend. The weekend after, and as we just teased, it should be hopefully a good one. It's always a good circuit. But next week we're going to do another special, and we're going to return to our series which we've called Lights Out, Lights On. And we're going to look at Sebastian Vettel. If you're new to Formula 1, you'll have caught the end of his career. over the last couple of years, where he was at Aston Martin, then the twilight was at the final few years of Ferrari. But we thought we'd go back and look at his career, right back from his days at Alpha Tauri, as formerly known as Toro Rosso, but then also when he then moved to Red Bull, became a 4-time world champion. He's moved to Ferrari to try and recreate the success of his hero Michael Schumacher, and then obviously the battles he had with Lewis, and then moved to Aston Martin as well. So it should be a really interesting one. Sebastian Vettel is a really interesting character. I think we've both got quite interesting views on him, quite different views on his views on his career as well. One that I think his reputation and views of him really changes the different points he's at his career. So it should be a really interesting one. And if you know everything about Sebastian Vettel, I think you'll find it enjoyable and probably quite nice. Sort of like nice look back over history and sort of romanticize about how good his career was and how good of a driver he was. And if you know nothing about Sebastian Vettel, you'll learn about one of the most interesting Formula 1 drivers and one of the most thought-provoking drivers, and I think quite an outlier of Formula 1 driver that we've not really seen quite like really in previous year, and we don't really have anyone like him at the moment in the grid. But yeah. Anything you want to say on Sebastian Vettel before we discuss it next weekend?
No, he's just enjoyably unique. I look forward to talking about him.
That's nice. I like that. Enjoyably unique. And with that, that's the end of the podcast. That's all from us. All the best and goodbye.
Bye-bye.